A new presentation at the AutoShow here in 2017. We're going to have panel discussions 3 times a day, one-on-one interviews, some presentations, sponsor announcements, and it's something that if something hits if it catches your ear and you want to stop and listen for a few minutes, that's great. Today's session is going to be on road tolls. Good idea, bad idea, middling idea. And to moderate the discussion, I would like to introduce you to Angus Keeley. Angus, you can tell everybody what you do and who you are.
Hi everybody, I'm Angus Keeley. I am a Director of Communications for the Residential and Civil Construction Alliance of Ontario and a former journalist with the Toronto Star. I've worked with Norris Wheels previously. So we're here to talk about road tolls. Basically, just to introduce this idea, the reason why we're doing this, obviously, road tolls have been in the news most recently. $11 billion of business in Toronto and the Greater Toronto area is being sideswiped every year by traffic congestion, and that's according to the CDAO Institute. And so some people believe something needs to be done to relieve city of congestion and help businesses run more smoothly. Some people say road tolls are the solution. Others say maybe a different kind of road pricing. And some people say, don't make me pay for infrastructure twice through income tax revenue levy, give me some more transit on. So without further ado, let me introduce our panelists here. To start off, we've heard from the host. This is Norris MacDonald, editor of Toronto Star Wheels.
Thank you very much. Great to be here. Thank you, Andy.
Thanks for coming. And beside him, we have Maurice Cacho, former deputy wheels editor of the Toronto Star. Good afternoon.
And a fine fellow, I might add.
Well, I have to learn from the best here.
The check is in the mail.
Great, and to Maurice's left, we have my boss, Andy Manahan, Executive Director of the Residential and Civil Construction Alliance of Ontario.
We work together, but nice to be here.
He's my boss. Anyway, so let's start with Andy, who is an advocate for infrastructure investment and road tolls. So Andy, Premier Kathleen Wynne made it clear that drivers taking the Gardiner Expressway and Don Valley Parkway will not pay the $2 tolls proposed by Toronto Mayor John Tory, which would have started in 2024. But you firmly believe the city and region need road tolls. What do you tell people who say they've already paid their fair share, or that I don't want to pay for infrastructure twice?
I'm going to do a PowerPoint presentation to help answer that question, so if I can rely on you, Angus, to power ahead. I'll just briefly say that our organization represents contractors and construction unions, many of whom are building roads and highways and bridges all across Ontario, and others who are involved with transit type infrastructure. So we really do cover the waterfront. And we do commission reports because we recognize that those of us who are not academics or consultants may not have all the right ideas. So we have commissioned a few reports. I brought a couple along right here about how to deal with congestion and how to finance roads in the future. So go to the next slide, to the wicked problems one. There's a lot of different wicked problems. I would say that road tolls is one of those. It's very controversial. It's one of those third rail things that politicians tend to hear from constituents who don't want to pay more taxes, as Angus was saying. And if you follow this through, can we leave this issue to a next generation? In the Greater Toronto Hamilton area, we've got 100,000 people moving into this region every year. And obviously, quite a large percentage of those people will be driving cars in and around the region. So there's only so much road capacity we have. We can certainly build more transit, but that's not the whole solution. And I think that's what Angus was getting at when he said the Premier didn't give Toronto the permission to put in road tolls a few weeks ago, and has suggested that more money will come out of gas tax revenues to pay for transit so that people have more choice. Next slide. This is a quote going back about 9 years right now. A former U.S. Secretary of Transportation said that relying on the gas tax is like relying on cardboard to keep the rain out. The longer you use it, the less it works. I think what she was trying to get at, in the U.S. they have something called highway trust funds, where money from gas tax revenues goes into these trust funds, either at the federal level or the state level. We were seeing about 5 or 6 years ago that some of these trust funds were well on their way to becoming bankrupt, primarily because the gas taxes had not been increased for about 25 years. A similar situation has actually occurred in Ontario and Canada. Just to give you a quick example right now, Ontario has charged 14.7 cents per litre since 1992 and has not increased that rate since that period of time. So the next slide. Gas tax revenues are going to decline over time for a variety of reasons. If you look around the auto show here, you'll see there's a lot more fuel-efficient vehicles, hybrid vehicles. We're certainly heading into more electric vehicles which don't use any fuel at all. We're seeing car sharing services, Uber type, and many others that are coming on. We're heading into an era of semi-autonomous where vehicles will be able to stop, and connected vehicles and that sort of thing. Platooning trucks, we've seen an example of a beer truck that actually drove on its own with no driver. The driver was sitting nearby. When those trucks are platooning, there's no driver in any of the trucks, and they're very close together, so they're actually saving on fuel by driving close together. So there's a lot of different trends that are happening. Next slide. So Professor Harry Kitchen, who's retired right now, but he's an economics professor up in Peterborough, took a look at this question about 3 years for us, and 3 years ago, and on a per capita basis, the trend for gas revenues is definitely downward, as you can see from the chart. So how do we fill the gap? And this is going to be a bit of a busy slide. The next one. You could certainly increase, as I said, 14.7 cents per litre. If you adjust that for inflation, it would be 23 cents per litre. So you could fill that gap a little bit. People wouldn't like it. We've recently seen that for the climate change initiative, cap and trade and so forth, the Queen's Park has, as of January 1st, implemented a 4.3 cent per litre climate change increase. I think because of the low gas prices relative to what they were, let's say, in 2014, when we were looking at over $1.30 up to $1.34 per litre in some cases, we're still at a relatively sweet spot at about $1.04 to $1.10 nowadays. But let's put that into perspective. So in 1992, the 14.7 cents per litre represented about 26% of what was back then in the early 90s an average of 56 cents per litre. Those were great days. Right now, 2017, at the current rates of up to $1.10, we're looking at 13 to 14 cents. So we're actually losing on an inflation-adjusted basis. So those people who say that gas taxes are already covering what we should be using to keep our roads in good shape are not really looking at this from an empirical perspective. So this comes to the big bullet here then, is that the road pricing and parking pricing are tools that could be used to both increase revenue, but perhaps more importantly, manage congestion a little bit in this growing region. So it's a user-pay system. Next slide. We've had toll roads for a long time, going back to 700 BC. We've got coin box stickers since the First World War, so kind of the 1920s, 1930s period. In the last 27 years, we've had electronic systems. 20 years ago, the 407 started, so that's the gantry system. And over the last decade, we've got into satellite-based systems, and that's almost on the cusp of being a very reliable source. So if you go to the next slide, in 2015...
Sorry, just a quick question, Andy. So some people have said that the road tolls will be paid by throwing money into a bucket as you're driving by, the toll set up. So what's the system that you anticipate will be put in place for, let's say, the Gardiner Expressway, if that ever did occur in the future, or another road around Ontario?
Well, based on some more testing, we think that using a satellite-based system is a viable way to go in the future. The next slide will show you that in 2015, during the Pan Am Games, there were 3 contractors or 3 firms that were doing testing to make sure these so-called telematics devices were able to ensure that the vehicle was within the HOV lane, and they were. They had it peer-reviewed by McMaster University, and they were about as close to 100% as you can get. So those are the yellow dots you see. And as you probably know, in September of last year, the province started a pilot project on the Queen Elizabeth Way in Burlington and Oakville. That's a 16.5-kilometer section where they've added so-called hot lanes or high occupancy toll lanes to the existing HOV lanes. So this allows a single driver to go on that particular road space by paying a fee, so it's a permit system. The next slide, I don't want to go into all the details, but basic message is that the City of Toronto was looking at putting tolls on the DVP and the Gardiner. I think that it's inevitable that we will see tolls in and around the Toronto area. You probably could link up the DVP going north to the 404 all the way to the 407 and start having a connected network. 427 could be added later. Some people have said that the 401 express lanes might be considered to be hot, with the collector lanes being so-called free lanes. But you'd have to move to a 3-person HOV lane so that you wouldn't start jamming up the hot lane, and then it would be going at the same slow rate as the general purpose lanes, which would be free. And the last slide is basically we want to keep people and goods moving. I recognize that tolls are an unpopular topic, but as I said at the beginning, I think they're inevitable, and we have to look at them and hopefully have a very energetic discussion on it, like today.
Right.
Well, okay, and I want to start the...
Okay, we've got Nora started now.
I want to get the energetic discussion going. Andy, that was a delightful presentation, and a lot of research, a lot of thinking went into it. Congratulations. Not that all that many people here at the show has seen this, but it is being live streamed, and I'm sure that it's going to be seen by significant numbers of people after the fact. First question I have to ask is, we're talking about collecting money. Where is that money going, and what is it going to be used for? Now, let me explain why I asked that question. When I moved to Mississauga 8 years ago, I don't like to say this too loudly, but I had just become a senior citizen. And I could go to Iceland, which is a public skating rink facility, and because I was 65, I didn't have to pay to go skating. 2 years later, the municipality of Mississauga said, we can't afford to keep subsidizing old people like you. You're going to have to start paying, not to take the money and put it into general revenues for everything, to specifically pay to maintain that facility and to pay the people who would flood the ice and keep it going. Unfortunately, whenever we talk about road tolls or whatever in the province of Ontario, with the exception of the 407, which is a private facility, we won't get into that. But whenever we talk about that, we're talking about taking that money and putting it into other things. I think as a motorist who commutes, that if you say to me, you have to pay $2 to drive on the Gardiner Expressway to get downtown to go to work, I wouldn't mind if that money was going to maintain the Gardiner Expressway. I think that there's a degree of resentment in there if it turns out that it's in fact another subsidy for something that's going on in the city of Toronto. Your thoughts?
I'll try to respond to that. Good point. As a retired person, the luxury you have is that you don't have to go
Who's retired?
retired age. That you don't have to travel during those peak times where everyone else is traveling. So we could set up a tolling system where the tolls are only charged, let's say, during the morning and evening rush hour peaks. And you could avoid all that by going mid-morning, mid-afternoon, for example. Now, I completely agree with you that any revenues that are collected should be going back into infrastructure. That's what our organization is all about. Now, so that could be into transit, because we do want to provide options for people to get around, and we can't keep on adding more cars to the region, as I said. I'm being told to speak closer.
You know a trick, and I can tell that Maurice knows how to do it. When you can hear yourself, you're using the mic the correct way.
Okay.
So that's kind of... Anyway, Maurice, you were going to pop in here. And by the way, you're a City of Toronto resident taxpayer.
Absolutely. I live in the city of Toronto. I've been living here for more than 10 years. But for a significant amount of time, I was driving into the city, coming in from Oakville from the 905 on the Gardner Expressway. And to this day, I still have many friends that do work in the city, but they don't take transit. They say, you know what, I don't like being close up against other people. I want to take transit.
I don't
Sorry,
blame
I want
them.
to drive. They want to drive and pay to park downtown, use the Gardner, or maybe it's DVP to get into the city. And they say, why are you going to tax me? Why do I have to be punished to drive on a highway that my tax dollars have paid for? Well, two things. First of all, there's a significant option for them with GO Transit, which they could take if they could just get over being close to other people. And the other is that the Gardner and the DVP isn't paid by the 905 taxpayers, but it's the City of Toronto highway. So it's not their contribution to the infrastructure that they're taking advantage of.
And by the way, I can see both sides of this discussion. I don't like to call it an argument. As Hazel McCagan or Bonnie Crombie, whichever, I can't remember who it was, Mayor and former Mayor of Mississauga the other day said, there are as many people driving out of Toronto now to their jobs in Burlington and Hamilton and in some cases Niagara as are coming in. And so that then becomes the question, you know, is the toll coming one way or is it just a grand toll that you get on that road and you're going to have to pay, like you do on the 407 of the New York State Freeway? Let me ask you as a City of Toronto taxpayer, and Andy, you're in on this. There is a discussion, and all you have to do is read the letters to the editor in the papers to see what many people in the 905 are thinking. And you know, having lived out there, our tax rate, and it's a rate, is higher than the tax rate in the City of Toronto, even though they had a 2% increase just the other day and made a big deal out of it. I guarantee you, as a citizen of Mississauga, my taxes go up 7 to 8% every year. And I think the idea is, why would tolls be implemented when, in fact, people who are property owners in Toronto aren't paying the same percentage as people who are actually coming in? So I'd like to hear your take on that.
You know, I'd argue as a whole that Toronto has more to worry about, more to pay for. So that's why they need additional revenue sources. And when you're thinking about how are you going to get this money, not just to pay for the expressways, but also transit, like the TTC, which is often used by many people from outside the city.
And we pay for that, by the way, when we get on. We all have our little Presto cards.
I should add as well, though, that the Gardner, the eastern portion, has to be taken down. This is a multi-billion-dollar project, so you're not going to cover that through existing revenue sources. So a toll, I think, would help, or some other source.
That's right. No, this is sorry, just a quick non sequitur here.
Moderator.
Just a little quick non sequitur here. I got a kick out. I was watching CP24, and they said they were going to close the Don Valley Parkway in the spring for the annual spring maintenance, but they saw no need to close the Gardner for spring maintenance. And what's not said is that they're going to have construction starting on the Gardner to replace the Young, York, and Bay Street ramp. So anybody coming in on the Gardner is going to be, their travel is going to be disrupted for about 2 years, never mind a weekend. And I got a kick out of what wasn't said in that grandiose news announcement. You know,
always reading between the lines.
Always reading between the lines.
So Norris, I had a question for you. Right?
Oh my goodness! What a surprise!
So look, you're being a guy from Mississauga. You see some of the worst traffic in all of Canada. So you don't want road tolls. You made that absolutely clear. So how do provincial and major municipalities break up the traffic jams we're seeing every day?
Well, first of all, thanks very much for putting me on the spot. And you know what, we should probably turn around. I keep forgetting that this is being live streamed, and they're getting pictures of us like this. We're going to look this way. First of all, although I wasn't adamant about it, I'm not anti-toll. I'm anti-toll when the money doesn't go to what I think it should be going to. That's all. I don't mind. That's why I started off this discussion talking about the fact that I have to pay a toonie to go skating on a Sunday afternoon. Yeah, it's a user fee. But there are levels here. I mean, we were talking in your presentation about the gas tax, and you know, all of a sudden, you know, we are paying a significant amount of money to drive the cars that we pay. We have to pay license fees. We have to pay a lot. I think people who drive cars, and we're at an auto show, surrounded by people who drive cars, presumably, and I think you feel a little put upon at times when we're looked upon as some kind of a bottomless pit. Nobody's going to raise property taxes in Toronto. Nobody's going to raise fares in Toronto. And so I'm interpreting this, and I know there's more to it than this, but I'm looked upon as somebody who in fact is subsidizing Toronto. And I'm saying, well, I want to be subsidizing Mississauga too.
Well, I probably feel like I'm subsidizing Mississauga. But here's another aspect. Here's another aspect, though, is that what if the road tolls clear out the DVP, Gardner, to an extent, and it is now a little more pleasurable to drive your car down the highway rather than just sitting there? You ever think about it? You know, we drive on a parkway. It seems more like a parking lot than it is a
absolutely
highway.
And that's why I'm all in favor of driver aids that are coming along. You know, the semi-autonomous cars. You get into a traffic jam, you can turn the responsibility over to the car.
But is it still fun?
And you can sit there. You know, you and I, when we actually put away these microphones, because it's interesting. It's sociologically interesting because you say, why do all these people do this day in and day out? They adjust. It becomes part of their day. It becomes private time.
A perfect point then, because I want to say that there's jurisdictions around the world where before they implemented road pricing, there was a lot of griping, and when it came in, places like Stockholm, people were supportive of it. They did polling and it was up to 75%, so they liked what they got. The other point I want to make is that the GTA is Canada's economic hub, 20% of GDP, et cetera, et cetera. So if we don't move goods around efficiently, the 401 is probably worse than the GDP with all the trucks. We're going to risk, the golden goose that laid kind of this really great economy. So it's not just the people that are driving single occupant, it's how do we get all the shipping happening around here?
Well, and that's a really, really good point. You and I should be actually running things because I got a feeling that we're kind of in the same area. I've been disappointed with the Ontario government, gotta say it. And this isn't because of the gas tax and the environment and that sort of stuff, and I think a lot of it is purely politics. But, you know, when they did build the extension of the 407 and they built the 412 down, I was really surprised that there was not some sort of a rider or an effort made to convince the truck traffic to start using some of these alternative routes. You know, yes, I know it costs money. Maybe they can make a deal so that if you're a licensed bonded transport truck taking auto parts from Michigan to the General Motors plant in Oshawa, that you can use the 407, which is much faster, much wider, and much more direct.
I can just say that
clogging up the 401 through Toronto.
I'm almost a daily user of the 407, and I've noticed anecdotally at least that there's a lot more commercial traffic using the 407. If you've got a time-sensitive delivery, not just couriers, but other goods are shipping around, that's a big set time saving.
But a lot more could be. You know, and at some point, I think if we're going to solve this, I think government has to kind of put its foot down at some point.
So let's bring it back to the commuters, because I think those are going to be the biggest audience that will be affected.
Thank you.
And
thank you for getting us back on track, Maurice.
So in theory, we're talking about putting tolls, or we were talking until the Premier Wynne overturned that, on the DVP and the Gardner. And there was some argument saying that, well, it's going to cripple the downtown for it, and it's going to hurt Toronto's economy. But I was in London, the real London, England, just about a month ago, and they've got the downtown congestion charge, and they charge you based on the size of your engine, and there's all these charges, and you know what? That place was still packed.
Still packed. and it always will be
And
packed.
nobody's saying, oh, I don't want to work in London because I can't get down to it.
Well, mind you, we know that there are a lot of companies, corporations that have moved out of Toronto to the 905. That's why the 905 is expanding as quickly as it is, because companies are hearing from their employees who are saying we can't afford to live in Toronto.
The millennials are wanting to come down.
Well, yeah, but they haven't had their kids yet. Trust me. When they start to build their
I guess I'm an
families,
outlier.
when they start to build their, well, you know, every now and again you're going to find an exception like you. And I'm talking about the vast majority. They want their little backyard where their kids can go out and play in the grass. And things are a little less frantic.
Pavement is a little difficult for your dog to do its business on in the city.
This is true. This is true. But you know, I think at the end of the day, why do people come to Toronto now? This is where the Maple Leafs play. This is where the Blue Jays play. This is where the Broadway shows come. With all due respect to, you know, the Mississauga Music Hall or whatever it's called, or the Markham Little Theatre, and they have some terrific acts out there. I know it's Crystal Cross in Markham a couple of years ago, nice little intimate 300-seat theater. That's the sort of thing you want. But you know, if you're going to have a pre-Broadway show, it's going to come to Toronto, and so you're going to come into Toronto. And at the end of the day, we're also affluent. We can afford to drive these cars. What's another $2? And government knows this, by the way.
Well, and I think the mayor knows that, and that's why he thought, well, it's not going to piss off his 416 voters. He might as well put it out there.
Right.
Here's a question for you,
Okay.
or for Andy. Do you think we're going to see another attempt to have tolls on these Toronto highways?
The province is doing the HOT pilot project on the QEW right now, and they've said for 27 extension they're going to have HOT lanes there, HOV HOT lanes. So I think we're going to see at least an incremental expansion of HOV HOT. Whether Toronto goes back right away and tries it, I think that set us back for sure.
How have these HOT lanes been for the province? Do we know? I haven't heard anything.
It's only been up and running since September, and unfortunately, they didn't use the satellite-based system, or gantries for that matter, like the 407, so they haven't been able to collect, I think, as meaningful data as they could. It's a sticker system, so how do you find out what the average speed is and the number of vehicles using it? So it was a pilot project, which is not really going to have the metrics that we need.
Andy, let me just ask one very quick question of that area. Why do we have in this province, we'll focus on transportation, but nobody seems to be able to agree on things. You just said, here was a pilot project that was going to give, you know, gather statistics and create information that can be used, and the MOT said, no, we're going to sell stickers. Why does that sort of thing happen?
The Ministry of Transportation is very risk averse.
Yeah.
And the minister himself said that about a year ago.
Yeah, everybody is just so conservative when it comes to some things. They just don't want to rock the boat one way or another.
So building on that, actually, Andy, I was going to ask, if you had a dream scenario where Kathleen Wynne said to you, put road tolls wherever you'd like in Ontario, where would you put them and why?
My dream scenario would have been immediately following the Pan Am Games, so when you had 235 kilometers of an HOV network. And I'm not a talk show listener per se, but a lot of people who were looking at these relatively empty HOV lanes said, I would be willing to pay that $2 to use that road space. So the dream scenario would have been one of those future backward things where we would have done a really good pilot project across the whole network. And then we could have done some good testing and measured stuff and everything else. I think that was a major missed opportunity.
Well, I get the feeling there's been a lot of missed opportunities. But you know, I'm going to suggest to Angus that we kind of wrap this up now. We've been talking for half an hour. I pretty much think that as far as the relatively narrow question that we were supposed to be debating, I think we've pretty well done that. And I think that I'll pass it off to Angus.
One last question, Maurice. So if you're, what do you tell your friends if you want to avoid the Gardner and the DVP? Where do you send them to? Like people from out of town.
Take the GO train.
That's the right answer. Take the GO train.
Suck it up and take the train. You know, swallow your pride.
That's what I did.
It's a great option. The network is there, so use it. drive to your local GO train station, hop on. They're running very frequently now compared to when I was coming into the city on the GO
And by the way, thousands upon thousands.
And they do.
today.
They do. It is packed.
Go to Union Station between 7 and 10 in the morning and try to walk against the flow.
Well, that's going to be a new Olympic
You'll be
sport.
trampled underfoot.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, that was fantastic. Great job, guys. Thank you to Norris and Maurice and Andy for a terrific panel, terrific discussion.
And thank you very much for organizing this, Angus. You're terrific. At 2 o'clock this afternoon, the Ontario Provincial Police are going to present Lego Batman, Robin, and Batgirl right here. So don't miss it. And then, my goodness, there's Batman there already. That's at 2 o'clock this afternoon, the OPP and Lego Batman. Thanks very much.